Hey guys, and welcome back to the Coder's Legacy channel. In this video, we have a very important topic to discuss in Matplotlib, which is text annotation. Now, what does this mean? What does text annotation mean? Well, it means that we're going to use text in our graphs. Because currently, we just have the graphs plotted, right? We just plot a graph and we leave it as such. We don't really do much other than give it an X label, a Y label, and a title, but sometimes we need some actual text inside the plot itself. Sometimes there's a specific feature, a specific part of the graph to which we want to draw some extra attention. Okay, like for example, if I run this code here, we have our graph. Okay, here it is. Now, in data science and, well, mathematics in general, we have this concept of a local minima, a global minima, a global maximum, and so on. So, like, the maximum point is, this point over here, okay, the highest point in this graph, the highest of y value, and the minima is this point over here, the lowest point, okay? And let's say that we want to make this obvious. We want to make this obvious to the person looking at this graph is that we want to show them the minima and the maxima. We want to make this obvious. Like, so someone can look at it and be like, oh, okay, this guy is making this graph to show me the minima and the maxima. Okay? Now, how do I do this? I want some text. I want to put a text label next to the minima and the maxima to show that, this is the minima and the maxima. So how do I do that? Luckily, there's a very, very easy and very handy way of doing so. Okay, it's called the annotate function. And this is heavily, heavily customizable. There are so many options in here that this entire video is just going to be about us passing in different values into this function. Okay, that's just how many parameters are actually in here. Okay, so the very first parameter that comes in here, the compulsory one, is our string. Okay, what string do we want to put? So let's start with the uh, global maxima. Okay, our second parameter is xy, which is basically the point of interest, the point that we want to annotate. Now, this in our case is going to be the global maxima, right? So what are the coordinates for it? Let's just comment this out and let's just run our code. All right, so our point of interest is roughly at x is equal to 2 and y is equal to 1. So I'll just pass in over here 2 and 1. Okay, now the third parameter is xy text. Now this is the coordinates of where we want the text to go. Okay, so I'm just going to put this at our offset of roughly 0.4. Okay, or let's go with 0.3. Okay, so this will appear a bit to the top, okay, a little above and a little to the right. This is useful because then you can position it wherever you want, underneath the point of interest, next to it, to the left, to the right, above it, and so on and so forth. So if we run this code now, we'll see our very basic form of annotation. Okay, we have our global maxima up there, a little up and a little to the right. Okay, so yeah, this is how you do it. This is a very, very basic implementation though, and we can make this a lot more better, okay, which is what this video is all about. So the very first thing I want to do is use arrow props. Arrow props can be used to add an arrow to our annotation, okay, because currently it's just some random text. It doesn't even point. It's not even obvious that, it's pointing to the global maxima. I mean, sure, the name does imply that, but we need to come up with something better than this. And for that, we have arrow props. Okay, now this is a dictionary, basically. Okay, and what we'll do here is pass in the color prop, red. And behold, here we have our arrow. Now it's much more obvious and looks much more better. Okay, I personally like this a lot more than the old one. I mean, who would prefer the old one? Now, this here actually makes it very obvious that we're pointing to and we're annotating the global maxima over there, okay? And yeah, there are a lot more parameters over here. What we can do, for example, is face color. Okay, face color basically, let me just see this. Yeah, now you see here that the color parameter basically makes the whole arrow red, but face color makes the inside of the arrow red. There's another parameter called edge color, and if you noticed in the graph just now, the edges were slightly black, right? Very thinly. It was kind of thin, but it was black. And that's actually the border, the edge. Okay, so we can change the edge color to something more obvious, like yellow. Okay, and here we go. Pretty cool, right? You can see the yellow over there. Well, it's still not very noticeable. So what we can do actually is use another parameter. Whoops. Uh, okay. What we can do is use line width to increase the, the width of the border. Let's try 0.5. And that's not very thick. Let's try 1.5. And yeah, that's thicker. Let's just change it to a better color. Blue. I think blue will be a lot more noticeable. And there, yeah, we can see that it's quite thick. Now we can like change this to like 2.5, and it's gonna become really blue, because now the internal size of the arrow is very small. Okay, it kind of expands inwards that way. So before we get lost in a sea of customizations, I just want to make it clear that you can actually call the annotate function multiple times. So if I duplicate this code and call it for the local minima, we can see that two texts, two arrows are going to pop up, okay? I'm just going to update these values a bit, okay? Just update the x and y text as well to make it appear near the bottom left of the local minima, okay? Remove the edge color just so that we keep it simple. And let's just keep the color parameter. Okay, change this one to add some color variety. Run our code, and we should get some nice output. What is up with that? Oh, I meant to do 0.5. All right, there we go. So it looks pretty nice, and that's actually another benefit, because the main purpose of this is to add in some extra meaning into your graph, some extra labeling, but it's also making our graph look nicer. Okay, so that's two birds with one stone. Okay, so yeah, pretty cool. Now let's just undo all those things that we did. Okay, and let's get back to our customizations. Okay, because that's really the main focus of today. All right. All right. So what we can do is use alpha. Alpha is pretty obvious what this does. This basically controls the transparency, takes the value from 0 to 1. So let's pass in 0.5. And we can see that the arrow is slightly transparent. Okay? It's pretty nice that way. Like if you don't want to draw too much attention to your arrow, make them a bit transparent. Okay? So what else do we have? All right, so what we can do is actually modify the head length and the arrow's head, and we can modify its shaft. We can modify these two independently of each other. Okay, so what we can do is like head length over here, then pass in an integer, like say 2. Okay, and if we take a look at our output, we can see that the arrow is really small. Let's change that up to something like 20. Okay, and now it's really big. Okay, and you should know by now that the arrow kind of scales automatically depending on the space available between the xy coordinate and the xy text coordinate. So in such cases, it's generally better to keep about, a fair amount of distance. Okay, so it looks more natural right now. All right, or we could just lower this down a bit to like 15, and we can also increase the head width. We can change the head width as well if we want the arrow that's very wide. So let's try 20. And yeah, that's a very wide arrowhead. Okay, and if we just use the regular width parameter, we can change the width of the shaft. Okay, so something like 10. This will probably give us a rather thick shaft. Yeah, cool. That actually looks nice. the head width and the head length all look very coordinated right now. Okay, and I think that length should also be a parameter. Uh, Let me try that. Length for the shaft length. Let's try 30. All right, that's not the case. Okay, I think that the shaft length is probably decided automatically based off the coordinates over here. Okay, so yeah, we'll forget that. Okay, so that's how we can change the dimensions. Let's talk about something else interesting. We can actually change the style. We can change the style of the arrow. Currently, it's just a basic arrow, right? It's a very simple, plain, ordinary arrow. We can actually make this a lot more fancier. Okay, so for that, we have two kinds of options. One of them is called connection style, and one of them is called arrow style. Okay, arrow style modifies the arrow itself. Connection style kind of changes the way it connects, between the XY text coordinates and the XY coordinates. All right, so let's start off with arrow style. Okay, arrow style is, again, most of these options are actually within arrow props. Okay, the annotate function only has 4 or 5 different parameters. Most of them are within arrow props. All right, so arrow style. What can we pass in here? Now, the default one, I think, is this. This is the default arrow style. Let me just run that to be sure. Oh yeah, and this reminds me. Uh, yeah, this reminds me of something that I don't think there's a default value here. I think it's none by default. And when you're using arrow styles, or at least when you're using certain types of arrow styles, like this one right here, you cannot use the width and the uh, face color parameters. Wait, no, you can use face color, but you can't use stuff like width, I think. Yeah, see, it's gonna give an error. So just keep that in mind. It's not obvious, but some parameters will actually disable other parameters. Okay, and yeah, face color is also kind of useless. Hold on. Face color is also useless because there is no internal area inside this arrow, so it's only an edge. It's only the border, so it's blue, which is what we defined over here, right? So just keep that in mind. And yeah, let's try customizing this arrow style a bit. We can make it a double-headed arrow, so it's like this now. Okay, you could even use an arrow like this. You could just remove the text here, by the way. You can remove the text here and maybe even use this to connect 2 points in your graph. Okay, that's also a very interesting way of using this. So you can also do this, which is rather interesting. Okay, this gives you a kind of filled in arrowhead. And I think that with this, we can get the head width parameter working, which normally I think would not work because now we have a head. Oh, okay. I guess it doesn't after all. Let's try head length. Maybe that'll will work. Nope. Oh well, that's okay. So yeah, we have a few other interesting arrow styles, a few predefined ones, kind of, and that is fancy. Fancy is, I like this one a lot. As you can see here, it has a rather fancy look to it. Okay, and let me try some parameters here. Maybe some of them will work. I think that they do work with fancy. No, they don't. Could have sworn at least one of them did. Let me just randomly try a few. Nope. Okay. Huh. I wonder if I'm remembering incorrectly. Head width? What about you? Alright, I guess not. Okay, so I actually paused the video and actually went to double check my website. And actually, it turns out I was correct, but I was remembering one thing slightly incorrectly. We can modify these arrow styles, but they're just modified in a slightly different way. Okay? And that's by passing in extra values in here, like this. Head width, for example, can be 10. And if we run this, it's actually going to work. And yeah, the scales are a bit different here. Just keep that in mind. So like pass in something normal, like one, okay? And we can also do 2. That will be a bit more obvious, I think. All right, that looks a bit odd, but it works. Let's try head width. Wait, sorry, head length, because it looks kind of small. Okay, and that definitely looks a bit odd, but I think that's mostly because of the tail. And we can modify the tail in the same way. Let me just tone that down, and we can modify the tail by just let's come down here. Okay, and tail. Wait, okay, this is gonna cause problems because we need to create a multi-line string. Otherwise, let's just move this a bit back. All right, and I'll change the tail width over here. It's kind of small right now. Change it to like 3. Okay, that is way too thick. I think a value of 2 for all of them is okay. Okay, well, somewhat. You guys get the point, right? We can change arrow styles, their parameters in this way. Now, the thing is that you should keep in mind that some styles will not work on other styles, by which I mean the head width, for example, might not work on certain types of this. You know, if I pass in this, some of these may not work. Yeah, see, tail width doesn't work over here because the way it's drawn is drawn as a single line. Okay, it's just a thin line. It doesn't have a width. So that's why certain parameters won't work with certain arrow styles. Just keep that in mind. Now, I know this is confusing, so this is actually why I want to explain everything, because if I don't, I know you guys will run into different errors like this. Now, I actually am going to leave several links down in the description below, and they're going to be 2 or 3 links, because this is something I've spread out and explained properly in 3 different tutorials on my website. One where we talked about annotation in general, one where we talked about arrow props in detail, each and every parameter with examples, and then one for arrow styles where we list all the possible arrow styles, each one of these styles and each parameter, and the parameters that each one of them take and their default values. Okay, so it's a lot of information to process. So if you're interested in this kind of thing, you can go over to my website and you can check all these out. Okay, so yeah, and that's enough for the arrow styles. Let's just tone those down a bit. There's one last parameter to discuss, okay, after which we can end the video. This parameter is called connection style, okay, and this can take stuff like angle, which is kind of cool. Watch. This basically changes the arrow itself, the way the arrow moves, the way it's shown. It's whether it's at an angle or whether it's curved. We can change the behavior like that. And the interesting thing is that we can combine this with arrow styles to produce some very interesting effect. So, for example, we made this a double arrow, so it kind of looks like this now, which is kind of cool. And similarly, hold on, let's try something else first. I think it's called arc 3. I think this is the curved one. No? I think it was angle 3. All right, yeah, there we go. So this is, as you can see, it's curved. And let me just put this a bit higher. Okay, sometimes we need to adjust the text a bit to make sure it's all showing properly. All right, okay, so yeah, that's about it. There's one more parameter that you can take a look at. It's called arc. Let's just run it and see what happens. Okay, that was very uneventful. Is that the default value? Not sure. There's one called bar. Let's just see what that does. Huh, interesting. Okay, well, like I said, there's a lot of different stuff like this, and if we remove the arrow style, chances are that we'll get something different, actually. Huh. Well, it turns out that removing it can actually cause problems. So I myself learned a lot in today's video, because when you keep trying things out over here, trying out different combinations, you actually learn new things. Some things are not compatible with each other, some things are. All right. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I just tried to show you as many customizations as possible, what's possible, well, what's not possible, what to expect when changing these different styles. Once again, if you want something as a reference, go to my website. I have links in the description below. Okay, you can find a complete list of all of these different properties and the different ways you can modify them in there. Okay, so yeah, with this I'll end the video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you want to see more content like this in the future, make sure to subscribe to the channel, stay updated, leave a like, leave a comment, and let me know what you thought, and hopefully I'll see you guys in a later video.